Hello friends, welcome back to the Life Reset Collective. My name is Josh. The purpose of this channel is to help people who are embarking on a life reset, needing to start again, maybe due to divorce, losing a home, having to change careers, whatever it is. Today I want to talk about resetting your nervous system. If you have been through or are going through a life reset, then you doubtlessly know that a lot of times a life reset is precipitated by a disaster. So in other words, I like to characterize this as follows. You're going along in life and then something happens, maybe a disaster of some kind. You get a illness diagnosis. Your boss tells you you're getting laid off. So, you have to change careers. Maybe your spouse tells you they want a divorce. Maybe you realize that you need to initiate a divorce, whatever. So you're going through life and then something happens, some kind of calamity, and then you kind of fall into this pit. You crash, this disaster. So all of a sudden, maybe a life that felt relatively safe and normal gets plunged into chaos and disaster. This is how I characterize a life reset. Okay. Well, that's how I characterize what leads up to a life reset. Then you fall down into this pit and you realize that you need to climb out of it, but you also need to climb this mountain in your life to kind of get back to normal, if normal is even possible, or the new norm is more like it. And that's actually the life reset, where we begin to do the work of climbing out of the pit and up the mountain to begin again, to find paradise, to find peace and hope on the other side of that mountain. And it's a long, hard grind. And that's why I created this channel, because I wanted to document my own process, and I also want to encourage other people who are going through a life reset. And if you're here, you're probably going through it, so welcome. Now, here's the problem with this. When you encounter the disaster that plunges you into the need to reset your life, you're probably going to be faced with, some bad things. Some bad things are probably going to happen to you. Maybe people are going to treat you badly. Maybe you're going to endure some trauma. You're not going to get out unscathed, that's for sure. And your nervous system is probably going to be on super high alert for a long time. Like, you might actually develop some chronic trauma, PTSD from some of the disaster. But what I'm talking about is more immediate. You might be plunged into a situation where your nervous system, as I describe it, just gets fried out. You just go on maximum anxiety, maximum depression, due to the circumstances surrounding the life disaster. It's all characterized by the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know whether there's hope or not. You're afraid. Very understandable. So what can you do to reset your nervous system and to get back to some semblance of feeling at all relatively normal? Well, the good news is that you can reset your nervous system. But the bad news, in my experience, is that this is often a lot more difficult than people give it credit for. Because the only way to reset your nervous system is to do two things. Number one, you need to get away from the toxic, trauma-causing things that facilitated the disaster and precipitated it. And then number two, you need time isolated from those things to let your nervous system calm down and reboot and recalibrate. This is very difficult because a lot of times we get stuck in a traumatic situation and we are forced to navigate in it for a while. So for example, let's take a divorce. Let's say that, your partner tells you they want a divorce, but you don't want one. All of a sudden your whole life is plunged into chaos. Well, what if, because you have kids together or because you both live in the same place, what if now not only are you going through this hard thing, but you're also having to be around this person every day while you're going through it because you still live together? Another example of this could be, what if you get laid off from your job? And this is a horrible situation. You're depending on that money. You were depending on being in that, environment. You were depending on this career path, but now everything's in question. Now you're wondering if you can even find a job to replace it. You're wondering if you're going to maybe even have to move or uproot your whole life. How long is it going to take to find a new job? Can you even find one in, an industry where you're going to be able to utilize your talents? Is this going to derail your career and set it back? Maybe you had a career trajectory, but now everything's kind of set back. It's a mess. But then not only do you have all that unknown and that kind of traumatic collapse and disaster to deal with, but then you might also continue to experience that as you go on your job hunt. You may be turning in applications every day, coping with that fear, that looming sense of doom. What if I can't recover from this? You're getting rejections, 10, 20, 30, 40 rejections a day on your resume. You're feeling pressure at home. Suddenly home becomes a place where you're just reminded of the danger and the disaster. Your office becomes a place where you're just reminded of the danger and disaster. See, when we are going through circumstances that are going to require a life reset, it's not just a problem. There's also usually environment around it that proliferates our nervous system going on high alert. And the hard truth of it is, in order to escape the disaster, in order to begin to climb toward the second part of your life, the next chapter, you're probably going to have to live in that toxic zone for a while. And your nervous system is probably going to stay on high alert. This is not fun. This feels terrible. And to be honest, it's not something that in a perfect world we should have to do. But it is something that we often do have to do in order to get through to the next chapter, in order to find, hope on the other side, to actually solve the problems and put them behind us. We do have to sometimes live in this toxic environment. So our nervous system stays on high alert while we're there. And, you might say to yourself, well, maybe I can find a way to get calm within the storm. It's very unlikely that you're going to succeed at that, because the truth is, when your body and your mind assess your current state as one of danger or threat to you, which it probably is, if you've been through some kind of disaster or are going through some kind of disaster, then truth is, there's probably very little that you can do through willpower alone to override those systems in your brain and your body, because your brain and your body is interpreting this as danger, which it is danger. You're in a disaster. So what is there to be done about it? What can we do? Well, in my ebook, there's a free ebook, which I linked to down in the description. You can download this for free. This is my Life Reset Framework, 9 Steps to Begin Again. I wrote this ebook after kind of identifying the 9 steps it takes to get through a life reset. But in this ebook, I talk about how we have to kind of do two things. We have to find a way to serve and heal and nurture ourselves while also making a plan and logistically escaping the disaster that brought us here. So there are some logistical things that we have to go through, but in the course of that, what we should eventually be doing is making a plan to escape this terrible environment. We don't want to stay there forever, and then we need to deploy that plan. The problem is, you might find small breaks for your nervous system in the midst of that, but odds are good that until you actually put some distance between you and the disaster, you're going to remain in a state of high alert. This is not good for your body. This is not good for your health. It feels terrible, but unfortunately, there's rarely a way around this. It's pretty rare that we can immediately get distance from the disaster and immediately begin to let our nervous system heal. A lot of times, we're going to be facing chronic neuroticism in and around the disaster zone of our life. And then we're going to have to kind of build ourselves up, prepare for the journey, and embark on the journey. And then we're going to have to put some distance between ourselves and that disaster before we can start to feel at all any sense of returning to normal. So here's what happens is the further you get from the disaster and the safer the territory you travel into, metaphorically in your life, the more your nervous system will be able to kind of start to calm down. And it might take a while. In fact, how long it's probably going to take is probably directly proportional to how long you were in a state of high anxiety or high alert or danger. It could take days, it could take months, it could take years. But eventually your nervous system will slowly start to heal, go back to normal. Then you're going to find yourself in a state where not only will that start to happen, but hopefully if you're getting to a better place in life and you're actually moving on to the next chapter and it's going well, you're going to get to a point where you don't even feel like you're in a state of disaster anymore. And you're going to start to feel and experience a lot more positive emotion than you probably did for months or maybe years in the time in and around the disaster, which is a terrible time, precipitating your life reset. And around the time that this is going to start to happen, your nervous system is going to start to slowly reset and return to normal, to where you're not always on just high alert. You're going to notice for a while after the disaster that even when little things happen, your nervous system is going to flare back up to full defense mode, because your body has grown accustomed to living in disaster. It's going to want to always be in that constant state of high alert, but eventually it'll calm down. And that's the only way that I've discovered to actually reset your nervous system. So friend, let me encourage you today. The fastest way to get through this is to begin the journey. And that's what I want to encourage you to do today. Start taking steps to begin that journey to your next chapter. And then when you actually get to safety, that's when your nervous system is going to have a chance to reset and heal. And that's when you are going to have a chance to reset and heal. Thank you so much for coming back for another one of my videos. I'm Josh. This is the Life Reset Collective. I will see you awesome people on the next one.